Hi, we're from Interaxon at UCLA, and we're going to talk about language development. A few languages that I know how to speak are English and French.
Few languages I know how to speak are English and Arabic.
A few languages I know how to speak are English and Spanish.
Starting off with the basics, what is language? Language is a systematic means of communicating ideas or feelings by the use of signs, sounds, and gestures. So what we say and hear is a form of language. Language is a form of communication. It helps us interact with others, like us talking to our friends and our family. Examples of language include the words we speak, the words we read or see in a book, and the use of our hands to say hi or bye. Spoken languages, though, are what you're probably most familiar with. So examples of these are English, French, Chinese, Spanish, and many more. We can also see spoken language used in technology. We see language in our everyday lives while using technology. For example, on our devices like iPads and iPhones, there is voice and language recognition through Siri. So Siri uses language by recognizing our voice and responding to us. Another thing that on such devices, we have the option to choose the language we want. In our settings, we can change the phone's language to Spanish instead of English. All forms of language, including gestures and spoken words, originate in the brain. That's where language is from. Understanding and producing language both come from two main parts of the brain. So the ones to know are Broca's area, which is responsible for language production, so that's its function. And the second part is Wernicke's area. So this is responsible for language comprehension, which is our ability to understand language. This is a diagram showing you where these two main areas are located in your brain. Language expression involves how we use language or how we communicate with one another. The way we express language isn't just by speaking. Other expressions of language include, of course, spoken language, sign language, writing, and reading. So the picture on the right is what sign language is. So we use our hands to express letters and spell out words or phrases. American Sign Language is actually very common in the United States today.
There are several parts of the brain associated with learning, understanding, and speaking languages. To start off, let's go back to Broca's area. This is important for grammar and language production in general. It has connections to the motor cortex, which relays signals from Broca's area to parts of the body that produce language, like your vocal cords or your hands. The arcuate fasciculus are nerve fibers connecting Wernicke's area and Broca's area, which allows for smooth and rapid transmission of speech comprehension over to speech production. Wernicke's area helps decipher word meaning and develop language comprehension, so it's located adjacent to the auditory cortex, which controls hearing. The visual cortex communicates with Wernicke's area when encountering words in one's native language. And the angular gyrus is important for word meaning, which means both these areas help us read. Now let's do an activity that puts the interactions of these parts of your brain to the test. How does our vision play a role in how we learn sounds? Watch the video to check out what happens when what we're seeing clashes with what we're hearing.
It seems easy enough to separate the sounds we hear from the sights we see. But there is one illusion that reveals this isn't always the case.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B.
Ba, ba, ba.
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
ba,
As we learned, humans use mouth movements to learn certain sounds, and in some cases, these cues are so powerful they override the actual sound we're hearing. Do we know if one side of the brain is more important for language development? The answer is yes. In a typical human, language is lateralized to the left hemisphere, meaning it's the most important and holds formal production and understanding of words. Broca's and Wernicke's area, remember those, are usually only present in a person's left hemisphere. The right hemisphere does play a role in learning more social aspects of language, though, like telling jokes or understanding sarcasm. There are 4 main stages of language development. Stage 1 is communicating and socializing to understand the social functions of language. Stage 2 is practicing phonology, which are the sounds that make up a language, like when you learn the alphabet. Stage 3 is growing your vocabulary, like how you used to practice naming fruits or vegetables. Do you remember doing these kinds of exercises with your parents or classmates? I had a little booklet with pictures and labels to learn all the animal names. Stage 4 is learning grammar, to properly combine words to form sentences and understanding the rules of a language. All of these stages take place from 1 to 4 years old. If humans aren't exposed to language before adolescence, their ability to learn language is almost lost.
Now we're going to switch gears to talk about the very interesting impacts certain social factors have on language development. The first one is birth order. Birth order of children with multiple siblings can contribute to how they learn and use language in big ways. The firstborn often has more language directed to them from a younger age, and so they tend to have more advanced vocabularies and stronger grammatical skills than their younger siblings. Are any of you the firstborn? Now you can brag to your younger siblings how you might be more advanced in language than them. But watch out, there are also benefits to being the younger sibling. The secondborn, or younger sibling, often has to compete for attention with their older sibling and listen to rather than participate in conversation. This can lead to better communication skills in social settings and a better ability to communicate important messages than their older siblings. Another social factor that affects language development is home environment. The amount of actual conversation that is spoken by a home, as opposed to language spoken by screens like a TV, can strengthen a child's language skills. In fact, in homes where the TV is on all the time, language development can be much slower. So next time you go to turn on the TV, maybe try talking to your family instead. Do you think you could learn Spanish better by watching Dora the Explorer or listening to 2 people in real life speak Spanish? If you said listen to 2 people in real life speak Spanish, you'd be absolutely right. Studies show that the part of the brain used for language acquisition is not used when hearing language from a TV. Speaking of knowing Spanish, let's talk about bilingualism, or knowing more than one language. Do any of you know more than one language? If so, I have some great news for you. Being bilingual has benefits. It increases your meta-linguistic awareness, which is really just a fancy way of saying you're good at abstract thinking and thinking outside the box. And additionally, you may have better executive function or ability to control your attention and focus on whatever task is at hand. It has also been found that being bilingual can protect against certain diseases like dementia. However, the path to being bilingual can be a tough one. Many children who are bilingual tend to develop their vocabulary slower and have an overall longer process of language development. The speed the second language is learned depends on the age of the child, similarity of the 2 languages, skill in the first known language, and motivation to learn. But remember, the journey is worth it for the purpose. Now we're going to do a quick activity called the Stroop task. For this first slide, pause the video after I'm finished explaining and get ready to time yourself for 15 seconds. Count how many colors, not words, you can read in that time. Nice, great job. Now let's do something a bit more challenging. For this next slide, you're going to do the same activity. Pause the video, set a timer for 15 seconds, but instead try to read the color, not the word, correctly. Count how many you get correct. Was this a bit harder? If it was, that's because it's hard for our brains to turn off a function it does well already, like reading words. Trying to turn it off to focus on colors instead is very difficult and goes against what our brains want to do. But wait, remember what we learned about bilingual people and focusing on tasks? Well, it turns out that that ability helps out here. Bilingual people inhibit one language while speaking the other, and it is theorized that this is translated into better inhibiting other actions the brain does, like wanting to read the word instead of say the color. Good job, everyone.
Everything we know about language development doesn't come from a textbook. Researchers had to go out and, with the help of people like us, do experiments to figure out how language works. An example of the methods they used includes lesion studies. A lesion is a damaged region of the brain. Scientists find unique patients that have damage to a specific region of the brain or have a surgical procedure that affects the part of the brain that they think impacts language. For example, patient Tan could only say tan, tan. And scientists discovered he had lesions in Broca's area, which shows that the area could be important for language production. One of the most basic ways to learn about the typical language development is to observe it happening in normal children. This can be through naturalistic observation, which is just a fancy way of saying watching kids interact in a normal situation, or bringing kids into labs to see how they respond to specific tasks and trials.
Another research method is neuroimaging. So this is what researchers use to read brainwaves and connect it to a computer, which gives you interesting information on language. For example, while you speak, activity increases in a certain area of your brain. One form of neuroimaging is electroencephalography, or also known as EEG. This records electrical activity of the brain through small metal electrodes placed on your head, as seen in the picture on the right. Basically, neuroimaging lets us know what the regions of high and low activity are while completing a certain task. This image shows your brain's activity on the computer or machine screen.
Neuroimaging is very cool. Now we're going to talk about something else that is very, very cool, the theory of linguistic relativity. You might be thinking to yourself, well, that doesn't sound very cool, but I'm here to tell you it absolutely is. Although some people contest it, it is a theory widely accepted by most sociolinguistics today. The theory says that it's the idea that the language or languages you know can influence the way you think. The language you know can affect the way you think in gender systems and even the space around you. There are a lot of languages that have gendered systems of describing things, where some words are feminine and some are masculine. For speakers of these languages, the gender assigned to these objects affects how they perceive them. In one study, it was found that German speakers who call a key the masculine der Schlüssel describe keys as being jagged, rough, metal, and hard. But Spanish speakers who call a key the feminine la llave describe keys as being intricate, little, and lovely. This highlights how the words we use and the way we use them influence our perceptions of the world. Very cool, right? Language also can affect the way we think about space. Some languages use relative terms such as left, right, back, or front when giving directions or pointing out an object in space, whereas other languages use absolute terms such as north, south, east, and west. This leads to individuals who use absolute terms being usually more aware of cardinal directions and their position in space versus individuals who only use relative terms. Yet another cool way language affects the way we think. Thank you so much from Interaxon for listening and participating and for coming on this journey with us today to learn. We hope you learned something cool, useful, or exciting about language development.